Let's jump into waiver wired with the running backs here, and we're going to start with Jerome Ford, who's got the Bengals this week. He's 57% available, so he meets our threshold. And obviously the news off of this RotoPat that is very relevant here is Nick Chubb, unfortunately, out for the season with a broken foot. Another brutal season-ending injury for Chubb. But on the flip side of this becomes Jerome Ford's backfield with an interesting schedule for the rest of the fantasy playoffs at the Bengals and then Sunday Night Football against the Dolphins.
There's a few variables here, as we know. The quarterback, this looms so large here, and I'm afraid it could go like all the way off the rails. Even against the Bengals with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but if they give Jameis one more start, Jerome Ford has just been so much better and efficient all year than Nick Chubb. He has 119 more yards than Nick Chubb on 15 fewer carries, just to illustrate how unfortunately unproductive Nick Chubb had been trying to come back from that knee injury. And all year we've heard about how bad the Browns supporting cast and setup is and the offensive line injuries, and Jerome Ford was still efficient even in that situation where Nick Chubb was not. And D'Onta Foreman is another bit of a wild card here. He's not going to be a healthy scratch anymore. But D'Onta Foreman cleared only 4 carries twice in 6 games earlier in this season. They just don't like D'Onta Foreman for some reason. They don't think he was a good fit for the offense. And so he will be involved, but especially if Jameis is out there one more game, even in the fantasy semifinals, I think you're trusting Jerome Ford as a top 24 running back. And even if it's DTR, then you can reason that Jerome Ford will be the focal point of the offense. He can probably still get in the top 30.
Right.
So lots of good outcomes to Jerome Ford, but better if it's Jameis Winston.
Yeah, so someone's got to step in and flex out Browns-Dolphins from Sunday Night Football in Week 17. Someone must, there has to be an intervention at that point. Yes,
guys, go upstairs and get someone to do that right now, please.
Well, if
NBC.
Jameis is requesting that God delivers from pick sixes, I'm requesting that God delivers from Browns-Dolphins Sunday Night Football. Yeah, exactly. That needs to change. But no, I agree with everything that Pat said. I think that just the matchup is so friendly against the Bengals. We've seen what running backs have been able to do all constantly. And also the fact that Jerome Ford, he should be somewhat game script immune, just given that he'll help in the passing game even if they do get down.
Right, and the Bengals over the last 4 weeks, they're allowing a league high over 32 points per game to running backs.
That's a lot.
It doesn't matter who the running back is. At the end of the day, if you're playing the Bengals, and it could be a backfield where Pat said it, there's not really somebody else that they're going to amplify touches to. It's just going to be a lot more of Ford. And it is a weird conversation, Pat, with Jameis versus DTR, because the argument for Jameis is, well, simply the offense should be better, or at least the volume is so much higher. Maybe Jerome Ford gets more work in the passing game. But like you said, if you go to DTR, it feels like Stefanski would want to protect him, and there'd be more carries for Ford. So I don't know what the better scenario is. I guess it is Jameis, because we had the combo last week. You could have a Tommy DeVito situation with DTR where there's just no production in the offense, but it is a weird balance between the two for Jerome Ford purposes.
Yeah, just 2 quick thoughts there. Where the Bengals are such a good matchup for a struggling quarterback, but DTR is one of those players where I think he could be the good matchup for the struggling defense.
Right.
You just have no idea what to expect from DTR, and not to get too deep into Jameis Winston cope, but Nick Chubb has been so ineffective and so inefficient. It was always second and forever, third and forever for this Browns offense. And when you have a turnover machine at quarterback like Jameis Winston, kind of his worst nightmare setup. And I just think even Jameis, they could be in so much better game script and second and third down to go situations if it's Jerome Ford, that it's truly only for fantasy purposes, but I just really want to see one more game of Jameis so badly.
Our next running back here, guys, is Tyjae Spears. The young Titans running back is 56% available. He's got the Colts. While he's notable, 2 reasons here, Jay. Tony Pollard missed practices last week, and then he was able to go for the game, but he leaves the game briefly with an ankle injury. Tyjae Spears only 4 carries. He does fall into the end zone on 1. But more importantly, the 7 targets, 6 catches, 87 yards, a receiving touchdown. This is his best sustainable usage in an offense is the pass game, and there's no reason to think that can't continue.
Yeah, and also, what are the Titans playing for? They can't make the playoffs. The season's done. You may as well give the younger prospects some run. Last week, Tyjae Spears saw season highs in snap rate, target share, receptions, and receiving yards. Gets a matchup against the Colts, team that has been very susceptible to running back production. Titans are dogs in this game, 4.5-point dogs. Suspect that they may be throwing the ball in the second half, though perhaps the Colts will not be running away from anyone. But still, I think that just when you combine where the Titans are in the season, the usage that Tyjae Spears got last week, and Pollard's injury situation, like there's just no reason why Tyjae Spears wouldn't be at least getting 50% of the snaps like he did last week, a little bit more, and be able to provide value to make him a viable flex guy, maybe very low-end RB2.
You just see a lot of green lights for Tyjae Spears because Tony Pollard's been playing banged up for a long time. Seems like the ankle has become a bigger issue. As you guys mentioned, then we see the big receiving performance from Tyjae Spears last week. The Colts have weirdly kind of become like a shutdown pass defense, but they're anything but on the ground. I think they're bottom 3 on the year in rushing yards allowed. They've allowed the most running back fantasy points over the past month. So that's good for Tony Pollard too, but just every sign points to like a 2-back approach. They're changing quarterbacks again, probably. And like Jay said, they think Tony Pollard's a part of their future too, but they want to see more out of Tyjae Spears, just what the approach should be next year. Because it seemed like they never quite figured out what it should be this year. And just, nothing but green lights really for Tyjae Spears, where even in the fantasy semifinals, a name you probably have not started a lot. He has a lot of things going in his favor as a flex. So you might not feel great about it, but he is a very justifiable flex, Tyjae Spears.
And I'll say this, even if you feel pretty certain about your lineup for the semifinals and you're looking at it saying, hey, I have a good shot to make the final, I'm not changing any of my starters, but you don't have a lot of claims to make, I would pick up Tyjae Spears, see if he replicates this pass game production again, or at least comes close to it, because then he's got Jacksonville when it's the fantasy championships. And the Jacksonville defense is dreadful against the pass. So if Tyjae Spears is going to be a big factor against the pass, it's weird to call somebody a stash, Pat, a week before the championship. But if you have that kind of roster flexibility right now, he could maybe even be a stash legitimately for fantasy titles.
Well, it's the time of year, too, where you can have luxuries on your bench where you should be honestly almost looking for, like, I know I'm not using this guy next week, but if I survive, like, he's guaranteed in my starting lineup next week, where you can maybe drop like that 4th or 5th receiver that you're just not going to use unless there's an injury. And you actually, can devote a bench spot to a player that you would not otherwise normally do when you're trying to plan 4 or 5 weeks ahead. You're just planning 1 week ahead right now.
Our last running back, Jay, we somehow always end up back with the Raiders backfield. It's just a carousel of whoever the name is at the time. Sincere McCormick left in the second quarter with an ankle injury on Monday Night Football. Alexander Mattison is 63% available. And, of course, who's he playing? Jacksonville, which makes him somewhat relevant, maybe in the semifinals for a really desperate team.
I think the highlight of Alexander Madison's season was the broadcast last night mistakenly attributing his fumble to Sincere McCormick. That's about the best thing that's happened to Alexander Madison. Look, if you're starting Alexander Madison in the fantasy playoffs...
How'd you get here?
Yeah, well, exactly. You're in a bad spot. I mean, the reality is that he is probably going to be a starting running back for an NFL team going up against the Jags, and will have a reasonable chance of falling into the end zone, but you can probably do better. But, I mean, based on last night's production... It's 7 carries for 21 yards. He does get 4 targets in the passing game. Turned him into 3 yards, by the way. So there's almost certainly better that you can do than Alexander Madison, but he has a chance to score 10 points.
Pat, I know this is an absolutely insane question to pose, but is Amir Abdullah more interesting then after a 20% target share against Atlanta, just maybe in PPR formats, or is this just there's really no way to have a feel either way on both of these guys?
No, you honestly took the thought right from me, where I was going to say, it's probably not a great sign for Alexander Madison that 11:30 p.m. Eastern, the Raiders are desperately trying to get a victory. It seemed like their first victory in months. And the guy out there is Amir Abdullah. And they seem like they're on to anyone but Madison. Like they're literally starting a third-year undrafted free agent named Sincere McCormick over Alexander Madison, where they just don't think Madison has the juice. He might literally not have the juice right now with his injury situation. I know he's playing, but he was out. They're giving him 1 more week, like 3 more weeks, it seemed like. And I actually probably would rather take my chances with Amir Abdullah on that pass catching.
Yeah, and he's 86% available, so you have a better chance to get him for that Jacksonville game.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.